had a question come in from a coach on pars fractures and how that relates back to pelvic motor control in the weight room. And the reason that we teach pelvic motor control with all of our incoming athletes in the foundation program is because every movement we do in the weight room relates back to that pelvis and rib cage congruency. We want a neutral pelvis with a rib cage stacked on top of it at all times. If they don't understand that concept, then that's not what we're going to get. What we often see in the RDL is athletes want to supplement lumbar extension, this big moment here, for hip extension. They stay in lumbar extension as they go down, and they stay in it as they come up. We've got this giant extension moment. And if you're an athlete that's had a pars fracture, which is a stress fracture from repeated extension and rotation, that is an absolute problem for you and something that will exacerbate that pars fracture or has the potential to exacerbate that pars fracture. As a young coach, I used to teach my athletes that had rounded backs and struggled to figure out how to get a flat back with a hip hinge. I used to teach them, stick your butt and your chest out, not realizing that I was truly exacerbating a problem. One of the cues that we utilize with our athletes to keep that neutral pelvis is imagine a piece of tape running from your rib cage to the top of your pelvis, or even use your hands, thumbs on the bottom of the rib cage, fingers on top of the pelvis. And as we go into our hip hinge, we actually use our abs to pull ourselves down. There should never be a break in the tape or the fingers. We should never have this moment here. If we're truly stacked in a neutral pelvic position, our ribs stay stacked on top of the pelvis, and we never lose that finger position. Our abs actually pull us down into the hip hinge. As far as anterior posterior pelvic tilt goes, anterior tilt is dumping water out the front. That's the movement that we don't necessarily want. Posterior pelvic tilt is stopping that water from dumping out the front. Your pelvis is really just a bowl. Anterior tilt dumps the water out. Posterior tilt holds the water in. We want to find the neutral position and maintain that throughout the hip hinge at the bottom and the top. This neutral position here, rib cage, is always stacked. That's why pelvic motor control is so important, not necessarily for what happens on the field, but what happens in the weight room. That's where it becomes vital.